A group of teens tries to prove their neighbor is a serial killer. Every once in a while, a movie comes along that I like, even though it doesn't really do anything special. The story is straightforward. The production, pretty low budget. And it's a perfect blend of, I think me and my friends could have made this in our backyard, with, I can't believe how good this looks and sounds based on the budget. Summer of '84 didn't need to take place in 1984, and was clearly just riding that nostalgic vibe that has come back into style in the past decade. The vibe feels very much like Stranger Things, with some Goonies and Stand By Me and The Lost Boys and any other number of 80s teen thriller horror action movies. But there's so many nods to other things as well. No one mentions it in the movie, but in one scene, the fictional arcade game Polybius that supposedly kills anyone who plays it shows up in the background. And there are also several nods to famous serial killers throughout. Now, growing up in a neighborhood with a bunch of kids, we were always out looking for adventure. Something to break us out of the monotony of being unable to drive anywhere fun. We would have lost our minds if there was a killer on the loose, and we probably would have tried to help the police solve the crime. Now, of course, if a killer was on the loose, our parents would never have let us out of the house. And in summer of '84, parents just didn't seem to care, and the kids roamed free. The cast centers on 4 boys who I don't think would be friends in real life. Now, in the 1980s, friendships seemed to be built much more on proximity than on personalities and actual interests. We have Davy, who is the heart of the group and the leader, and he's the one who drives the story forward. We have Woody, who is the most down-to-earth and caring of the group, and of the 4 boys, he's probably the one that I would have been the closest to. Faraday is the nerd of the group, and you know this because he's wearing glasses. And then there's Tommy, who was my least favorite character in the group. He was that one who thought he was way cooler and better looking than he really was. This was definitely a shell that he put on due to his bad home life, but the way that everything that he said just became some sex joke just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I grew up with people who did the same thing, and just because as an adult I didn't like hearing young teens talk like that doesn't mean there aren't young teens who talk like that. Also, just saying all of that has never made me feel older. The acting in summer of '84 was fine, but no one stood out as a breakout star. Even so, everyone in the cast was just generally likable. Now, while I liked all of the cast, I don't feel like every character was completely necessary. And the same goes for plot lines. There were several character traits or throwaway lines of dialogue that in a normal movie would have somehow impacted the story and led somewhere, but here they just were never fleshed out. As an example, Davy mentions he is an amateur videographer to a neighbor, and a few minutes later he asks his dad to borrow a camera, but he's turned down. Now, later in the movie he does use a camera, but I don't feel like those 2 earlier scenes really were needed. He could have just started using the camera later in the movie, and I would have never said, how does he know how to use that camera? And my favorite part about the movie is definitely the overall vibe of it. Everything looked realistically like it was in the 1980s, but the real standout was the score. It has that same synth vibe that Halloween made so popular in the 1970s that ushered in so many copycats throughout the 1980s all the way up through Stranger Things. The score added so much to the movie. Those low bass notes that would rumble the walls every time tension built just never got old. My other favorite part of the movie that I didn't know that I liked the first time I watched it was the major tone shift in the 3rd act. Now, I think, honestly, that is the standout feature of the movie. When it ended, my wife spelled out what she thinks should have happened, and it had never even crossed my mind. But honestly, I think it would have been more shocking and effective her way. Now, I don't at all dislike where the story ended up, but there was definitely a different direction that it could have been that would have been more effective. Summer of '84 is a solid horror film. Doesn't do anything revolutionary, but it just puts me in that Halloween fall mood that I have so many fond memories of from childhood. Flipping off your neighbor while washing your car shirtless, picking up trash after a raccoon, playing flashlight hide and seek with all the neighborhood kids, riding bikes with your boys, stealing your mom's car.